So with indoor archery season here, and many of you going to your very first tournament this year, I figured I should make a video that I think is extremely important because I've had a lot of people who've come to me for coaching, and I see one thing that's extremely common for beginner shooters who have never been to a tournament before, and it absolutely will cause a huge problem once you get to the event. So I'm going to give you one thing that so many new shooters need to stop doing before they go to their first archery tournament. So like I said there in the intro, I've had a lot of people coming to me lately for coaching, specifically because they want to start their first archery event or go to their first archery tournament. And what I'm noticing is something that will cause all sorts of problems once they're at the event. Because many people have started shooting barebow specifically, and some of them have either come from traditional or they've just shot in their backyard their entire life, but they're wanting to start competing. Many people are picking up the barebow. I have seen this a little bit with recurve, but mostly it's in the barebow division. And when they come to me, they are really going to have a problem when they're competing and impeding other people's shooting lanes. So especially now that COVID's over, right? Or at least we're no longer doing what we used to do in social distancing and all that stuff. Basically, people have a whole lot less real estate, a whole lot less space on the shooting line in order to shoot. People who picked up their bow recently during COVID and maybe went to a competition while COVID precautions were still going on towards the tail end had lots and lots of space, had like at least 6 feet of space between them and the next shooter. So many people, when they would load their arrow, would be in this position here with their bow turned sideways, and this is how they would load their arrow, like that, which is really a problem because in a World Archery sanctioned event, which can be USA Archery, and many other organizers out there, many other sanctioning bodies, all have roughly the same rules. For indoors, you only have a shooting lane that is 80 centimeters wide, which is roughly 31.5 inches. So that means from the center of your lane to the center of the next lane, meaning the center of the body of the next person, is only 31.5 inches in front of you, and the one behind you is only 31.5 inches behind you. So if you have your bow turned sideways, you're covering 2 people that direction, 2 people that direction, and now there's a big problem. And if you're used to loading your arrow with your bow turned sideways down here, like many people do, how big of a shock do you think it's going to be to your system when you now have to learn how to nock your arrows with the bow in the proper position? It's going to be quite difficult, right? It's not going to be easy, and you're doing it in the middle of a tournament, which is something else that is also new for you, or possibly new for you. So it's an extra added level of stress that you can deal with and get rid of by just simply setting up your system, nocking your arrow with your bow vertical. So like I said, for the indoor shooting, you only have 80 centimeters or 31.5 inches. And for outdoors, you only have 90 centimeters, which is roughly 35.5 inches. Now those are minimum standards. Those are minimum amounts that you are required to give as a tournament organizing committee for a tournament. And most tournaments want to get as many people in the smallest space possible, so they tighten everything up as much as possible. So it's really important to make sure you mind your own space and mind the space of others around you, and really pay attention to where your limb tips are pointed and where your arrow is headed when you're nocking it. Many people use a regular hip quiver, which sticks the arrows out towards the front like this. And that is another thing that can happen, is you can poke the person in the back behind you when you go to take your arrows out of your quiver. So something that you can do that might be very helpful is to practice taking your arrows out of your quiver, practice nocking your arrows into your bow with very limited space. Something that you could do would be consider nocking your arrows or setting, getting ready for the shot with stuff near you, whether that be up against the wall or up against a cabinet or something like that. And if I were to stand roughly 15 inches away from this cabinet, because that's the edge of somebody else's lane, so from the cabinet to me is 15, and then from me to another object would be 15 more inches. So roughly a 31-inch shooting lane is all I have to deal with. And so I need to make sure I don't hit the cabinet behind me when I go to load my arrow. I'm hitting somebody behind me while they're at full draw, and now they just shot a miss. How do you think I'm going to feel when I go to my first event? Not very good. So this is why you got to do it right now before you go to the event. Learn how to pull your arrow out of your quiver, load it into your bow, and get ready to shoot, all while staying in your own lane and not bumping the person next to you. It's really, really important. many people take this sport seriously, and it's not always just for fun. So you don't want to impede on somebody else's performance, and you don't want to be the one causing that performance to be not up to their expectations and cause them to miss, cause them to have issues, or even just be stressful or have to wait for you to take your bow from being turned this way, blocking them, to being vertical and not being in the way. So there's two different ways that you can knock your arrows without impeding the people around you. Obviously, this is not the way to do it. Don't do it like this. This is how it gets you in trouble. You can see how much real estate I'm taking up on either side of me, right? So one of two ways to do it is put the bow on your foot, on your toe, and you can load your arrow in this position where the bow is nice and vertical, and I'm not touching or hitting anybody around me. I'm not hitting that wall that's only 15 inches away from me, and we're good. Now, technically, that person is standing in the middle of their lane, so I've got about 30 inches till I touch them, but you just want to try to make it as difficult as possible for you while you're at home trying to learn how to do this comfortably, because you might actually be shooting up against the wall and have a very narrow lane as well. I've had that happen to me in the range that I grew up in. I would always shoot either on the wall over there, on the wall over there, and it was a bit of a challenge, but it prepared me very well for my future career in competitive archery. So that's the first way to do it. With the bow down on your toe, you knock the arrow, and then you get ready to shoot, take it back vertical, and then go through your whole routine. The other option would be to start with it in this type of position. So you can't quite see it because of the camera, but I'm basically resting the bottom of my limb like this onto the inside of this knee and kind of pinching it with my other leg. And so I'm standing here in my shooting ready position, and I'm kind of squeezing the bottom limb tip like this, holding onto the grip and just letting my arm hang relaxed here. And so I'm standing like this, then I take my arrow out of my quiver, load it into my bow, knock it, and this whole time it was staying in my lane again. So those are really the two ways to do it, and trust me, you want to learn how to do this now. It may be awkward and it may take a little bit of time to get used to, but imagine how difficult and stressful it'll be when you go to a tournament and not only you're affecting other people, but now you're having to change your entire routine at your very first tournament, and I don't want you to go through that. That's why I'm making this video. Hopefully head this off at the pass, because like I said, many of you picked up your bow, especially a bare bow or a recurve, during COVID, and then if you started competing when COVID precautions were going on, the lanes were huge. Now they're dramatically smaller, and you have to stay in your lane. You don't want to hit other people. Trust me, there's nothing worse than influencing somebody else on the line next to you, especially if they're taking it seriously. Hey, if you like this video, consider sharing it, because that's the best way for me to grow. Also, hit the subscription button and the notification bell. It genuinely helps this channel out. And also check out all the links in the description below in many different ways you can help support this channel. I produce content for free for everybody around the world to enjoy, because nothing like this existed when I was learning archery. Thank you.